City Council votes against the recommended discipline for Councillor Rajni Agarwal. Good evening and thank you for joining us. Councillor Rajni Agarwal will not be removed from the Fort William Bia board, despite that recommendation from Thunder Bay's Integrity Commissioner.
According to their report, Agarwal was found to be rude and caused 3 other board members to resign because of her conduct. The council decided to go a different route, rather than imposing a punishment. It's the second Integrity Commissioner report to come to council since November regarding the same individual.
I don't sit there to take a seat or to put a feather in my cap. I sit there to help.
The report is in relation to Councillor Rajni Agarwal's demeanor as a Fort William BIA board member, which the Integrity Commission found to be rude, abrasive, and disruptive. The report said that led to 3 board members stepping down. While the Integrity Commissioner was recommending Agarwal be removed from the board, the BIA said it wanted to keep her on it. Council opted instead to look at education opportunities for Agarwal. Councillor Mark Benz was in favor of that option, saying he understands firsthand the challenges of being a newer councillor.
I can speak from experience. When I was first elected, I wasn't quite sure of my role, and I likely overstepped my boundaries often.
The clerk's office will now bring back possible education options during the April 8th meeting. Councillor Shelby Chung felt this could prevent these issues from continuing.
I think some training is necessary, and hopefully it'll help mitigate things like this in the future, because we really do not have the time or resources to be spending on this in the future.
Councillor Andrew Folds voted against the education, believing the commissioner's findings were clear.
We just heard the Integrity Commissioner say that beyond a reasonable doubt that these actions took place, not just a balance of probabilities. And what we saw is a mass resignation of individuals.
Agarwal took the chance to defend herself, recognizing the challenges the Fort William BIA has faced in the past, but stressing the positive direction she and the other members are moving in now.
If anybody else wishes to take that position on and help them and beautify that area so it is on the doorstep of our City Hall, I welcome them to do so. It's a concern of mine, and I hope to make a little bit of a difference. And this board that we have right now is a phenomenal, hard-working board.
The previous Integrity Commissioner report in November was related to a rude gesture Agarwal made during an argument with 2 citizens, with council opting to dock her 30 days' pay. Also during last night's meeting, City Council agreed to push back the date for a final report on the proposed indoor turf facility, but staff remain confident this won't impact when shovels can get in the ground. Delaying the final report was the result of poor soil conditions discovered at the proposed site next to the community auditorium. It means a deeper foundation is required at an additional cost of $600,000. City Engineering Director Kayla Dixon says the delay won't change the start date of construction, which is planned for the summer of 2025. Dixon explains administration's role before the final report comes back in June.
Council has asked for public engagement, so we do still have some stakeholder engagement to organize. As well, we'll be continuing with preliminary design work to confirm the impacts of the geotechnical and environmental assessment that was completed. And we also have some financial analysis that's required to look at the operating impacts of that facility.
The budget increase due to the soil conditions brings the estimated price tag to more than $38.6 million.
The Thunder Bay Police Board is looking to hire a second deputy police chief. The local police force has traditionally just had 1 deputy chief, but that will no longer be the case.
Also at today's meeting, police board members said farewell to Malcolm Mercer, the administrator appointed on the run to run the board in 2022, following some turbulent times. Ned Van Pelt has the details.
Following a recommendation to hire a second deputy chief of police, a job posting is officially out and the hiring process has started. The board had discussions with Chief Darcy Fleury on what this structure would look like, and it was determined that it would be a deputy of administration who can focus on some of the bigger things and take some items off of the chief's plate. This was supported by the board and the governance committee. Board chair Karen Machado spoke about the reasoning behind the decision.
I think it's all about workload as well. What the specific recommendation dealt with Indigenous populations and a focus on, and their focus being that. The chief in his presentation determined that he felt that that function, the Indigenous community and the relationship building, would be best in his role as the chief, so, start from the top.
Applicants must apply by April 5th. Meanwhile, as the board looks to add another leader to the team, they are losing one in Malcolm Mercer. He was appointed as administrator of the police board 2 years ago, following a series of controversies and external probes involving the police force and the board. Mercer had the only vote on the board until the end of June 2023, when it was decided the board members earned their votes back. He believes he's leaving the board in a better place.
What I consciously would say is that there has been progress, success in a society, in a community like Thunder Bay, which has generations of history leading to the current realities, will take generations to achieve.
Machado says the board is very grateful for all of the knowledge and support Mercer passed on to them during his time as administrator. She believes they are ready to move on and won't find themselves in that position again.
If we do struggle, that we can work collaboratively and cohesively to move those items forward. There are going to be various opinions, so we need to be able to communicate openly and effectively. The focus and the structure will still be on the board, the policies that we need to do, the recommendations that are out there, so that we don't fall into that position again.
Nev Van Pelt, TBT News.
With just over a month to provide their say on whether they support a nuclear waste site nearby, residents of Ignace can now have a look at exactly what they would be agreeing to. The municipality signed an agreement with Canada's Nuclear Waste Management Organization at a special council meeting last night, which could be worth as much as $170 million over the next 170 years. Ignace Mayor Kim Bagri and WMO President Lori Swamy signed the potential host agreement. It details the terms each party would agree to if Ignace agrees to host the site and is selected. It also establishes a project framework for more than a century of expected activity. Council unanimously supported the agreement, which includes direct payments that could be paid to Ignace over the project lifespan if everything moves forward. The township also anticipates billions in indirect economic impact from the construction of the $26 billion project.
The people they're going to need at the, to build this, they're going to train our people. It is for our people. They're going to train for our people, whether it's Wabigoon people or people from Ignace. They're going to train the employees they need. That's the benefit.
The role I think this agreement will play is really to demonstrate the commitment. This is the document that holds the NWMO and the township accountable for those commitments to each other going forward.
The full 80-page agreement, as well as a summary, are available on the township's website, and there will be a chance to ask questions at an informational event on April 12th and 13th. Ignace residents have until April 30th to weigh in before council makes its decision. The agreement includes a $500,000 incentive for the municipality if they confirm the conclusion of the willingness process by June 30th.
At Queen's Park, the Ontario Liberals are trying to change gears.
But there are lingering questions about new leader Bonnie Crombie's pledge that she won't support a carbon tax. Siobhan Morris brings us the details.
From an agricultural conference in London, the Premier continues to rail against the federal carbon tax.
I don't know what the guy's smoking up there, but it's not beneficial. It hurts people.
It is now time for...
In question period 2, Progressive Conservatives had a singular focus.
The federal carbon tax.
Their upcoming carbon tax increase.
The carbon tax.
The people of Ontario have had enough of this carbon tax.
Scrap the tax. It's a bunch of baloney, Mr. Speaker.
It comes as the Ontario Liberal leader has taken the possibility of a carbon tax off the table in building her climate change policy.
We will make polluters pay, but we won't add additional tax burden to Ontarians because we know they can't handle more taxes at this time.
Crombie won't explicitly say whether the federal Liberals' policy has been a mistake, if she thinks they should cancel a planned carbon tax hike April 1st.
I'm not here to tell them how to do their job. I'm here to create a plan that's right for Ontarians.
We couldn't get an answer again out of the queen of the carbon tax.
With the PCs urging Crombie to push her federal cousins to make a change.
It's her job. It's our job in the Ontario legislature to represent the people of Ontario.
The Liberals found the question period performance revealing.
The government is bereft of ideas. The only thing they've got is attack, and if you listen to question period, all they talk about is carbon tax.
Rather than the issues they're being challenged on.
They don't talk about 2 million Ontarians that don't have a family dog. They don't talk about people having to pull out their credit card.
Take a question about seniors facing climbing rent.
While the living conditions in their building keep getting worse.
What is causing grief for tenants is the cost of everything, and the cost of everything is tied to the carbon tax, Mr. Speaker.
The Liberals have established a panel to come up with a climate policy before the next election. Bonnie Crombie says that could include reviving cap and trade in Ontario if the Trudeau Liberals lose their next election. Siobhan Morris, CTV News.
Hospital officials in the Northwest are calling for another extension to provincial funding that helps smaller hospitals avoid temporary ER closures. The temporary locum program was started during the pandemic and pays physicians from Southern Ontario a premium for temporary work placements at rural and northern hospitals. The program was supposed to expire last September, but was extended until March 31st. With that date quickly approaching, Lake of the Woods Hospital CEO Ray Reset says their emergency room can't operate without locums.
This is the only way we can stay open, and even what, like our physicians, even though they're about 50% short, they're still picking up at least 70% of the volume, but they just can't stretch farther and pick up the full 100. So we really need locums now.
Reset says he's heard rumblings that the locum program will be extended, but he says it's very difficult to make staffing plans for the next few months until the Ford government makes an official announcement. The issue was raised at Queen's Park today by Kiiwetinoong MPP Sol Mamakwa.
Northern Ontario hospitals have been struggling to keep their emergency room doors open for years now. The program that allows them to hire locum doctors from Southern Ontario as a temporary fix is coming to an end. What is this government going to do to make sure our ERs in the north stay open?
Without a doubt, it has been a program that has had value. We are in active conversations with the Ontario Hospital Association and the Ontario Medical Association to see how we can come forward with a more permanent solution, but I will keep the member updated because it is an important issue.
A Northside bar and restaurant has raised a lot of money for the Dewdrop Inn. A check for $5,000 was presented to the local soup kitchen today by officials from the Social. Staff at Dawson Road establishment spent all of February raising money through the sale of their popular smash burgers. $4 from every burger sale went towards the Dewdrop Inn, and 292 burgers were sold during the campaign. Staff at the Social also made donations to the cause, along with other supporting businesses. Dewdrop Inn Executive Director Michael Kibel says the big donation will help them serve around 2,000 meals.
This is how we feed the hungry in Thunder Bay, with the community support. So bottom line is we could not offer a good meal daily without this support. So we really depend on it and rely on it, and the support from the community has been amazing.
We have amazing patrons that come here, everybody that's supported us, and I just felt like it was nice to do something back for the community. I know the Dewdrop Inn does amazing work. They, they work very, very hard to help feed people, and that's kind of what we do here too, is feed people.
Now, hot weather Haley, I gotta say, that namesake, I'm not really feeling it in the community the last few days with those colder temperatures, those winds kicking in.
Well, Vasilios, I like to say sometimes you don't feel the heat in the sky or in the temperature, but in your heart.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Okay, yeah, I'm trying to get on that angle with things here. So, it is the first day of spring, and it's certainly not looking or feeling like it. But, spring also makes you think of Easter time. So egg-shaped things. Our high today was 0. That's another bit of a stretch there, but I'm trying my best. Our low was only -4. That was quite early this morning. And we saw overnight snow end around 4 a.m. But then we got some sporadic light flurries popping back up again around 1 in the afternoon. And that's continued on up until now. And we've started to see progressive winds throughout the day as well. We started out low when it was more from the west at only 3 kilometers an hour, but now we're seeing around 51 kilometers an hour at certain gusty moments coming from the northwest, and that'll be the trend as we move on this evening. And as we look at the light snow that I was mentioning, we have a little bit of a system sprinkling in. It's almost like it's sweeping through from the west down closer to Lake Superior. But what I really want to draw your attention to is this larger system that's spiraling more towards the east. And we'll see trends of that tonight as well. So when we look at our regional map, light snow was seen all day in Red Lake and even blowing at times with that northwest wind, but things have cleared up at this hour and now they're just seeing mostly cloudy skies. Fort Frances is overcast as well, seeing lots of clouds, but -5 right now. We see the trend of -9 continuing on through Kenora, Sioux Lookout, and into Armstrong. Greenstone, because they're more on the eastern side of things, they will be seeing snow right now and throughout the evening, but they're currently at -7. We see a matching pair of -5s in Nipigon and Marathon right now, and then snow continuing on down in Sault Ste. Marie as well as they're at -4 right now. So we're seeing a lot of snow on the east side, things clearing up on the west side, and we'll see things drop quite drastically this evening as well. As we look at Thunder Bay's temperature tonight, we're expected to drop down to -14, feeling like -20 with the wind chill. Mainly cloudy. We'll still have a 40% chance of flurries as well, but most likely light and sporadic. So it's not the greatest news for the first day of spring, that's for sure, but hopefully I'll have some things to brighten it up later.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Haley. It definitely doesn't feel like spring. It feels like the first day of winter because we really haven't seen it.
No, we have not.
That's Thunder Bay weather for you, for sure. Thank you so much. Well, when we come back, we will shift our attention to Ottawa, where members of the public were able to say their final farewells to Canada's 18th Prime Minister, Brian Mulroney. We'll have more on that as your Tuesday News Hour continues.
He established trust with leaders around the world, and in doing so, exemplified the soft power of Canada.
The streets in Ottawa leading up to Parliament Hill are closed as members of the public line up outside.
It's their first opportunity to pay respects to former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. With more, here's CTV's Judy Trin.
For a decade, Brian Mulroney took the same route on Wellington Street to work. On this last drive, his family is with him again, watching as his casket is placed on the shoulders of Mounties.
Prepare to shoulder.
One who was 4 years old when Mulroney became Canada's 18th Prime Minister.
He's certainly a leader that I think we can all look up to.
Mulroney's casket is guarded by a vigil of sentinels. At his lying in state, the first visitors were dignitaries and successors. Mulroney's presence a reminder of what it takes to follow in his steps.
He established trust with leaders around the world, and in doing so, exemplified the soft power of Canada, the fundamental values of empathy, of trust.
It's Mulroney's mark on the world stage that resonates for many here, including Canada's first Black Governor General.
He practiced diplomacy, the way he stood up to the cause, against apartheid in South Africa, the way he stood up, for the release and pleaded for the release of Nelson Mandela.
South Africa's High Commissioner, Riaz Sheikh, stopped to show Mila Mulroney a treasured photo of the moment her husband was awarded the African country's highest honor for breaking with the United States and Britain and helping to dismantle a racist regime.
It took enormous courage, and that fractured the politics of the world and allowed what we would call in Zulu vulindlela. It opened the way that led for change in South Africa.
But the boy from Bay Como is also being remembered for smaller moments, for winning back-to-back majority governments based on inclusive politics.
He treated every caucus member as, in a sense, an equal because we had all been elected. He made a point of befriending people who he thought were either shy or against him.
For those who can't make it to Ottawa to pay their respects in person, the Department of Canadian Heritage has set up an online book of condolences. Judy Trin, CTV News, Ottawa.
There's some good news regarding the Canadian economy, as Canada's inflation rate slowed slightly in February. Statistics Canada reports the Consumer Price Index rose by 2.8% on a year-over-year basis, down from an increase of 2.9% in January. Canadians paid less for cellular services, while prices for groceries increased at a slower rate for the first time since October 2021. Canadians paid much more for gasoline, though, with prices at the pump rising by 0.8% compared to a 4% decline in January.
The Federal Auditor General is slamming Ottawa's track record on First Nations housing.
This is the fourth year since 2003 that we are raising the alarm about unsafe and unsuitable housing in First Nations communities.
In a report tabled today, Karen Hogan says she's completely discouraged to see so little improvement to substandard housing in First Nations over the past 2 decades. Speaking after the report was released, Indigenous Services Minister Patty Hajdu said the federal government continues its work to transfer care and control of housing to First Nations and ending government control of First Nations housing.
There is progress, it is being made, but there is so much work to do. The housing challenge for First Nations is not a simple solution. It requires systemic change. There are many barriers in the way of communities that are looking to increase housing in remote areas, for example, transportation of infrastructure, access to skilled tradespeople.
Hogan also found that poor management is leaving many First Nations underserved when it comes to policing, with funds in the highly criticized First Nations policing program unspent. It's official, 2023 was the warmest year on record. That's according to a new report from the World Meteorological Organization. It was a year marked by intense weather events, both here in Canada and abroad. The organization says records were broken across the globe for greenhouse gas levels, surface temperatures, ocean heat, sea level rise, and glacier retreat in 2023. A mix of heat waves, floods, droughts, wildfires, and intense tropical cyclones were also noted in the report as a source of billions in economic loss. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres calls the report an indication that planet Earth is, quote, issuing a distress call.
Some records are just chart-topping, they are chart-busting, and changes are speeding up. Sea level rises are accelerating, threatening coastal communities. And last September, Antarctic sea ice was 1 million square kilometers smaller than the previous record low for the time of year. That's an area almost 25 times the size of Switzerland. The impact of all these is stark, brutal, and accelerating with a deadly force.
The report shows the global temperature rose 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels last year. Scientists are now warning that 2024 could be even worse.
Canada's defense minister announced the next ammunition package for Ukraine. Bill Blair says Canada will give more than $40 million to a Czech-led initiative aimed at buying over 800,000 artillery shells from third nations for Ukraine. It comes after news that Canada will also ramp up its own production for the Canadian Armed Forces.
We need them to develop new production lines. We need them to modify their production and increase their production. That's going to take some time, and so we've provided them with money, and we're working very closely with them to develop a strong plan in order to increase that production. I think it has to be based on our collaborative work together, but the long-term vision is to actually significantly increase munitions production here in Canada, because I believe very much production is deterrence.
Canada is also donating more than $7 million worth of night vision devices to Kyiv. Ammunition supply has become a critical issue for Ukraine as the country drags into its third year of conflict with Russia.
A controversial NDP motion on Palestinian statehood passed in the House of Commons last night, but not before some last-minute amendments from the Liberal government. Now, at least one Liberal MP says he's reflecting on whether or not he belongs in the Liberal caucus. Mike Lecouture explains.
I declare the motion as amended carried.
Late Monday night, the amended motion on Palestinian statehood passed in the House of Commons. And it's left a number of Liberals upset.
Where I truly felt last night that a line had been crossed. When my party members got up and cheered and gave a standing ovation to Heather McPherson and the NDP, I started reflecting as to whether or not I belonged.
McPherson brought forth the motion that originally called for the recognition of the state of Palestine. After negotiations between the Liberals and NDP, the wording says the government will work towards a two-state solution. Another Liberal who voted against the motion decried how hastily the debate was handled.
I think it would have been more desirable for us to have had a negotiation on amendments a little bit earlier on in the process.
In an early morning press conference, the National Council of Canadian Muslims called the motion an historic reaffirming of Palestinian human rights.
This motion should mark the beginning of Canada's journey towards ensuring that Palestinians are given the opportunity to have self-determination and human rights like everyone else across the globe.
The motion is non-binding and largely symbolic, even though it calls for an immediate ceasefire and for Hamas to lay down all its arms. But B'nai B'rith Canada calls it an appalling disregard for Israel's right to defend itself.
I believe the fact that over 200 members of parliament endorsed this motion is indicative of the direction in which